Welcome to episode 4 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, where today my guest will be Andrew Wheelock, and we will discuss student collaboration, virtual environments, web whiteboard, Google Drawings, Microsoft Teams, Trello, CoSpaces, Minecraft, OpenSims, flip cameras, WeVideo, and more. We'll also hear from some listeners, talk about a few contests, and wait, this can't be right. My notes say that we're going to talk about hockey and a band named Tres Huevos. Well, let's just start the show so we can see if that's accurate.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hi there. Welcome into episode 4 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. My name is Jake, and I'm here to talk to you about duct tape and how, in the weird metaphor in my mind, it relates to educational technology, and more importantly, how you could use it in your classrooms or your schools to solve problems, meet goals, address needs, and enhance student learning. Before we get into that, I've got a few things to discuss with my 9 listeners. I think we're up to 9 this week. We'll see. Anyhow, right off the bat, thank you for your positive feedback on last week's episode with Sarah Rivera. Lots of people expressed their interest in trying out peer grade and other suggestions from the episode, and still more expressed amusement and Sarah's affinity for taxidermied animals. What a surprise that was. If you haven't listened to episode 3, I definitely recommend that you go back and give it a listen. Speaking of the feedback that I've received, I'll be sharing some of that at the end of the episode and giving shout outs to those of you who shared on Twitter with the hashtag EDUDuctTape, in Apple Podcast reviews, or on the new Flipgrid grids for the podcast. Speaking of those Flipgrid grids, you can find them by heading over to eduducttape.com, looking for the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community, and clicking on the link. Lots of people gave feedback in the last week, so today what I'd like to ask for is suggestions for educational duct tape questions for my upcoming guests and I to address. You'll notice that there's a special grid in there for them to frame your thinking on the types of questions I'm looking for. In episode 1, I addressed the question of how to get educators to tune into the screencasted tips that I create. In episode 2, Ann and I addressed how to help students practice speeches and how to connect students to a global community. In episode 3, I chatted about how I made my math lessons more engaging and made my planning of those lessons more efficient. My guest for that episode, Sarah, and I addressed how to provide students with feedback and how to provide opportunities for peer feedback. So anyhow, jump over to EDUDuctTape. That's EDUDuctTape.com. Look for the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community. Click the link and then select the Educational Duct Tape Questions grid. Be sure to tell us your name and where you're from, because if your question is good enough, I'll be using it in a future episode. And what the hey, let's make this a contest too. The first 5 people to ask questions in there, not counting the people that have already posted in there, will get free stickers sent to them. Don't worry, I'll make sure those people that already posted in there also get free stickers. So it'll be those ones plus the next 5. Speaking of free stickers, I'm still planning on giving free stickers to 20 different people who tweet about the show during the month of January 2019. Just use the hashtag EDUDuctTape. That's EDUDuctTape. You can enter once per episode during this month. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. Okay, I'm up here on my soapbox. I'm not sure if this is really a soapbox kind of moment, more of a story, but it's nice and comfy up here on my soapbox, so we'll go with it. Last week, I talked about how I started using a smart board in my second year of teaching 8th grade math, algebra, and advanced algebra. I loved that thing, and it revitalized my classroom. The next school year, there was a big surprise in store for myself and my colleagues that turned my classroom upside down. Our administration had decided to make some scheduling changes that led to our classes being shortened from 50 minutes down to about 42 minutes. This loss of 8 minutes per period sent me into a frenzy. I remember talking to my friends about it who are not educators, and they thought I was bonkers talking about this 8 minutes being taken off of every class period. They thought that seemed like a good thing. I told them, oh, it's a horrible thing. I had created all these perfect lessons in my smartboard software, which I had intended to revise, but now I had to revise to fit an 8-minute shorter period. I had all kinds of irrational thoughts about what I would do. Maybe I would learn to talk super fast like the Micro Machines guy from the commercials back in the 1980s. Maybe I would stop greeting my students as they entered the room. Maybe I would start teaching as they were walking in the door, and I'd be up at the board, and as they'd walk in, I'd be like, 3x plus 9 equals, hey, get in here, sit down in your seat. We don't have a minute to spare. Then I thought about eliminating going over our nightly homework, but decided that wasn't a rational decision. And that actually led me to an educational duct tape solution. Well, before I had thought of the term educational duct tape, what I started doing was recording a screencast of myself going over each day's homework from the smartboard. I kept it to 5 minutes maximum because really, if I can't do it in 5 minutes, I'm giving too much homework. And because if I'm spending more than 5 minutes going over the homework, I'm wasting class time. And then at the beginning of every class period, I would play that video to the class while I circulated around the room, seeing who had done their homework, who had not, who was absent, helping students who were absent the day before, doing some formative assessment by seeing who was marking a lot of stuff wrong on their homework, and checking in with students who seemed confused. It was like I'd used that screencasting to clone myself in the classroom. Not only was I resolving the time issue by making going over the homework faster, but I was actually benefiting from it because I was able to observe the students while I shared with the students how to do the work. Now, I should say that a lot of things have changed since then. First of all, if I was in a math classroom now, I would not spend very much time at a smartboard. Second, I wouldn't assign very much homework, if any at all. And finally, back then I was using a program called Jing. Today I recommend most educators and students use Screencastify, while I personally use Camtasia. Ironically, Camtasia is made by TechSmith, who all those years ago made Jing. I'll actually stick one of those videos in the show notes. What you'll see is my writing appearing on the screen while I do the homework. What you'll hear is me talking my way through the problems. It was a pretty genius solution, if I do say so myself. My coworkers did think I was bonkers because they'd walk by my room during my planning period and see me writing on the board and talking to an empty room. As Ron Weasley would say, they thought I was a nutter. Anyhow, this was all educational duct tape. I had a problem, shortened class periods, and I utilized educational technology to resolve it, recording screencasts of the homework and playing them at the beginning of the period. One last note while I'm up here on my soapbox, I'm going to change gears a bit on this one. A few days ago, I shared what is undoubtedly my most popular EDU GIF, or Edu GIF. It's about how you can use the Google Translate formula in Google Sheets to create a list of translations. Typically, educators love this as an option for creating vocabulary lists for English language learners. Anyhow, while hundreds of people always like and retweet that one, there are always a handful that point out the negatives of it. And you know what? Aside from some possible overreactions and some occasional rudeness, they're correct. I certainly would not suggest that a spreadsheet full of translations can single-handedly make a student fluent in new language. Nor would I expect an algorithm that takes words that often have multiple meanings and then translates them to different languages to be 100% accurate. But most importantly, I would never suggest that a tool like this replaces a good teacher. And this is what it comes down to. Good educators with quality rapport with their students, using informative data about those students along with sound pedagogy and experiential wisdom, know better about what to do for those kiddos than some guy in Kent, Ohio making GIFs in his office basement. And that's how it should be. All educational tools have the potential to be effective for a specific educator with specific students in specific environments with specific needs and specific goals and specific backgrounds in specific situations. And you have the power to make those decisions. So if you're a teacher who has a student from another country who just moved to America, speaks very little English, and you and your ELL instructor in your school don't speak that language either, then maybe a spreadsheet full of translations that are probably 90% accurate is a great idea, because what else are you going to do in that situation? But maybe you've got a better tool available, and if you do, fantastic. Again, you have the power to make those decisions, and I am here to help you build your confidence in this framework. Fill your toolboxes with educational technology tools and ideas from myself and my guests, and then pull them out when they are the right one for a given situation. Just like a handyman only pulls out that duct tape when it's the right tool. And there we are, full circle, back to educational duct tape. So let me step back down off my soapbox and then welcome in our guest.
Today's guest.
All right, today we're here with Andrew Wheelock. Andy is an educator, husband, and father of 3. After 13 years as an elementary teacher, he slowly found himself gravitating to teaching and learning with technology. He is a technology integrator for Erie One, BOCES Winnie Rick. He travels around Western New York helping teachers harness technology for teaching and learning. Andy is also the co-chair of ISTE Virtual Environments Network. You can follow Andy on Twitter at AM Wheelock, that's WHEELOCK, and see what he's up to at www.coffeewithageek.org. Welcome in, Andy.
Thank you. Great to be here. Honored, actually. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. So I first met Andy, I should point out, from Coffee with a Geek, which is Andy's, is it monthly or is there a certain amount of time?
I try and do it monthly. Yes.
Monthly. So, and it's a live, YouTube live event that's then hosted on YouTube. So I had the honor of being on Coffee with a Geek a little while back, to talk some tech. And so I said, well, Andy, this is a great chat. So let's continue the conversation on educational duct tape. First, let's hear a little bit about what Coffee with a Geek is, since I jumped right into that.
Sure. It started really locally for me because, as I traveled around to different school districts in Western New York, there's such amazing teachers, and it always kind of inspires me to see other teachers and doing great things. And because I like technology, I kind of, zoom into teachers that are doing great things. So I started just with locally, and we actually started going to coffee shops originally and doing the interviews, but we found the coffee shops were closing after we were leaving. So we changed that up. I don't think there's any, hopefully, direct correlation to that, but coffee shops are tough to keep, I guess. But anyway, so yeah. I continued it on with YouTube Live, and really it's been great. And that's opened me up as well, because I was able to kind of reach out through Twitter like I did with you and just say, hey, you're doing great work. I'd love to talk to you about what you're up to. So that just, it totally energizes me. So, the Coffee with a Geek concept for me is just an inspirational way to chat with other people who are doing great things and hopefully learn and hopefully share that learning and share what great people are doing. So
yeah, I definitely recommend the people that are listening. I joked last week that we had 7 listeners. So I think now we're probably up to eight listeners. So I would recommend that all 8 of them check out Coffee with a Geek, because you've had some great guests on in the past and some great chit chats with them. So in that little bio, I mentioned that you work for Erie One, BOCES, Winnie Rick, and those are both acronyms that'll be in the show notes. Can you explain what those 2 things are?
Sure. BOCES is a Board of Cooperative Educational Services. So in a nutshell, that's basically a shared services that schools, it would cost a lot for schools to do individually, but by sharing it works. So we offer a variety of different solutions for education. It's just a publicly funded organization, and the Winnie Rick is kind of a sub unit in there that really focuses on technology shared services. So we help teachers with professional development in my division. So
interesting. We do have similar organizations to that here in Ohio. So before we jump into our actual educational duct tape questions, let's have a little bit of fun first.
Great.
So let's do 2 truths and a lie. I know you've prepared 3 statements for me. I'm going to try to guess which one's the true one here. No, I'm sorry, which one's the lie?
Which one's
here?
The lie? Okay.
2 truths and 1 lie.
So here we go. So number 1, in September, I broke my leg in 2 places playing in bar league hockey.
Hey.
2, I once played in a band called Tres Huevos.
The 3 eggs.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't take ourselves too seriously. I shouldn't have said that, right? I kind of gave you a clue.
Maybe you're just a really good actor, maybe.
Yeah, I played Division III hockey in college as a goalie. Those are my...
Oh, okay. So I would normally, if somebody said they were involved in hockey, I would assume that was the lie. But you are in Buffalo area, New York. So I think that's pretty believable, right, that you're involved in hockey up there. So I'm going to... One of the hockey statements has to be true, right? So I think it's got to be the broken leg. I think that's more likely than playing division. I don't know, Andrew. You might be a really good hockey player. Okay, I'm going to guess the Division III hockey goalie is the lie.
All right, you got it. Yes,
Nice. But more importantly, what kind of music does Tres Huevos play?
Well, we played our own kind of blend of, it's the 90s, I think, when the band was there. So we were, I guess, kind of a grunge style band with a little smoother vocals, let's put it that way. Nice. And I wasn't the vocalist, so
nice. So hockey and 90s rock, 90s grunge rock. Nice. I like it. So for those of you taking notes at home about Andy, we've got virtual environments, we've got New York, we've got hockey, we've got Tres Huevos, and we've got 90s grunge rock and coffee and geek, right?
Yeah.
Those are the notes if you're keeping score at home.
Awesome.
All right, so let's jump into the educational duct tape questions here. So first up is my question. What are some good tools for large-scale collaboration? So we're thinking about groups working together on projects here. So they're working on something larger than maybe just a homework assignment, and they're working in a group and collaborating together, which obviously is such an important skill for our kids to have. So what are some good tools you can recommend for that?
Well, one of the ones I came up with is Web Whiteboard. Again, this is kind of getting those students started with some design ideas and getting their, ideas put down in both drawings, text, connections, arrows, that, putting things together there. So I guess when I first started thinking of collaboration, that's the one that popped out to me.
No, so Web Whiteboard, I'll link it into the show notes there. It's webwhiteboard.com.
Yep.
And it's completely free. Is that right?
It is free. There's, of course, the freemium versus the premium version. The premium version is $8 a month, which I think is, kind of, maybe I shouldn't say it, kind of pricey for educators. That means $100 a year, close to it. But the free version basically stays open for 21 days, which if you're doing a collaboration project, the opening thing, 21 days, I think is pretty solid. So, and all the tools are free to use within those 21 days. So
what I could see, so just poking around in it, because I've never actually used it in the classroom before, what I could see is that you've got drawing tools, right? And you've got text tools, and you can add in images and add in like Post-it notes. Is that right?
Yep. Very clean.
So just a kind of a big white space for students to start organizing their thinking. Now, when they draw something on there, can they then move what they draw around the board?
That's a good question. I haven't tried that. Maybe we'll have to tinker on that one. But
yeah, I don't think so. Maybe they can move the Post-it notes though. I'm clicking away on my computer right now as we talk. Yeah, you can move the Post-it notes, but you can't move the drawings. But still, that's a great way for kids to start getting their ideas down in one shared space. And if they're using those little Post-it notes, they could start kind of dragging them and organizing them, right?
Yep. Yeah, and you can start a Hangout as well within there. So it's like I said, it's simple and clean, gets kids started and sharing quickly. So
when you start the Hangout, does that is it a audio chat or a text chat or video chat? What is it?
It's a Google Hangout. Yeah,
literally an actual Google Hangout. Okay, so yeah. They don't even have to be in the same school or the same room to participate, right?
Yep.
So if students use this, one of them would go to it and create it and then send the link out. Is that how it would work?
Correct. Yes.
Neat.
Yep.
Okay, so it's just a nice little kind of clean slate sharing space. It's nice that you could use it without logging into it as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So it's a way for students to interact that doesn't require yet another account taking their information. So, a nice little like privacy plus there that you don't have to create another account to connect to.
Exactly.
And it does give a nice little space there for planning.
Yeah.
That's great. So I actually went a similar direction with this. I used to teach a STEM class to middle schoolers, and we used Google Drawings a lot for it. So what I would have them do if they were, let's say they were building a basswood bridge together in an engineering project, they would be normally in groups of 2 or 3. And on each of their computers, they would share a Google drawing. And in there, they could actually draw the bridge they were planning on making and label in the measurements, show how long each piece of wood was going to be, agree on their design so that when I gave them their wood to build, they already had planned out what they were going to do. What I really liked about doing it in there was it was really easy for them to share to me to grade, which Web Whiteboard would be as well, but also that they could then pull that up on, say, their phone while they're sitting at the area in the room where I was allowing them to cut the basswood and glue the basswood. So they could have their phone sitting there with the drawing open right there on it, able to say, okay, how long does this piece of wood need to be? 62 centimeters. Okay, so I'll grab my ruler and measure out 62 centimeters. But then they can make those drawings from the computer and then have access to them wherever they were at, which would also be the same with Web Whiteboard. The pro with Google Drawings is the other drawing tools, and they're being able to draw, rectangles and lines and things like that and have those precise measurements. So I think it kind of just depends on what you're trying to do. Is it organizing content, maybe then Web Whiteboard is a superior model, or are you trying to actually draw a diagram of something? And then maybe in that situation, Google Drawings is a better idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of teachers that prefer to just use Google Slides in place of Google Drawings. And I think that's fine too. It just really depends on what your goal is. And that's kind of the whole educational duct tape thing, right? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And then you could normally decide which is the better tool for you to use, between maybe Web Whiteboard or Google Drawings or Google Slides. Okay. Have you ever used any tools with students like Trello? Are you familiar with Trello?
Is that the audio?
No, Trello is It's kind of a task management or organization space. I use it personally for organizing tasks, kind of like to-dos, and I put them into different columns based on the different categories of things I'm doing. But it also, I think, makes a great place for students to organize tasks in a collaborative group. I've never had students use it. That's why I was curious to see if you had ever used anything similar to that.
Recently I am working in an Office 365 district, and Teams seems to be kind of a platform that has some of that functionality.
Oh, okay.
And I think Microsoft's done a nice job with that. I mean, I think they started off as a business model, but transitioning to the classroom actually, I think, could show some benefits.
So tell me about Microsoft Teams, because I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's an Office 365 app, and it basically includes, a chat. It includes an area for shared files, for shared conversations. So it has within the team, and they've fitted it for education so that teachers can create teams basically like Google Classroom or, I don't want to call it a full learning management system per se, but basically it will allow teachers to create a team, bring their students in, share files that they would have access to at all times, and then also add extensions like assignments. So it will allow assignments, which will link to calendar, which, you can link to forms and that sort of thing. So it's pretty nice, and it works pretty fluently. And, there's other applications you can bring in to add.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like it's halfway between being a learning management system like Classroom, like you mentioned, and being something more like Slack that you would use maybe in the business world.
Exactly. Yep.
Where they're actually collaborating. That's interesting. That's something I'll have to look into. I have not used much of the new Microsoft tools, but it might be something I have to check into.
Yeah, I think it's got potential.
Okay, so I know you brought in a question as well, too. So what's your educational duct tape question?
Sure. So how can we, as teachers, give students a unique and deeper understanding of historical events and locations?
Okay, so what I'd like to see educators do in this situation is to put students in the role of creator rather than of the role of memorizer or regurgitator of information. What I'd suggest is to have the students creating video reenactments of events and conversations. So they take on the roles, they actually do some role playing from in those situations, because in order to do that, they have to process what the different people, the different groups involved in these historical situations were feeling, what they were experiencing, what their goals were. So if you're reenacting maybe the causes of World War II or something like that, you have to understand what the Germans were feeling, what the Americans were feeling, what all these different groups were feeling in order to reenact them. Or if you're reenacting the interactions between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, you have to understand what was the Native Americans' point of view at this time? What was the Pilgrims' point of view? So the kids really have to understand that kind of stuff. So what I'd suggest is filming some videos. A Chromebook school could pretty easily just use the video app that's built into the Chromebooks now. It just got updated to have video on it about a year or so ago. Or they could use something like Screencastify that has web recording built right into it and just videotape from the Chromebook. The downside of that is, the Chromebook's kind of stationary. You can't really move it around the room. So it's kind of got to be on a strict set. But we're really not looking for studio quality here in most situations. So I think that works. One thing we actually do at my school, when I came to my school a couple of years ago, I discovered that we had dozens of old flip cameras just sitting around not being used anymore. Do you remember the flip cameras?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've got a bunch of them too.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that the school must have purchased them back in probably 2008 or 2009 or something for some video projects. And then when Flip, the company, went under and the software stopped working because iPhones kind of squeezed them out of the market, people stopped using the Flip cameras. But what I found the educators I worked with didn't know was that those cameras still work, and the USB stick on the side of it still works with a Chromebook. You just can't run the Flip software, and that's totally fine. So what the kids will do is they'll videotape from the Flip camera, pop it into their Chromebook's USB slot, and drag those files right into their drive, and then they have them there. Most of the times we use that with WeVideo, is our video editing tool that we use. And sometimes we'll have the kids in front of a green screen, and WeVideo, if you have the paid version, actually lets them edit the videos and put in the background. So then they could select a background based on the historical events they're talking about that actually fits that scene. And we're using those old cameras that have just been sitting there for over a decade. So I know as co-chair of the ISTE Virtual Environments Network, you probably have some pretty novel stuff that you would do in this situation to get the kids building that unique and deeper understanding of historical events.
Yeah, I've been with the Virtual Environments Network for quite some time, and it's gone through evolution just like all of our technologies have. So to give you just some examples, and I loved your how you framed historical learning, and I do believe, and I've said this often enough where I have it down to somewhat memory, is that you only understand history until you can see it in your own mind's eye.
Right.
And so giving kids that rich experience, and that's why, literature is so great, because you can bring a student into a time period through books.
Right. It's not just a series of facts being kind of laid out. It's actually putting you in the perspective of the people, right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So one of the projects I did, which actually starts with literature and ends with a virtual environment, is, The Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank. It's just a mind-blowing book, but it's also a book that you relate to on such a deep level, because Anne talks in such a powerful experience of just being a teenager, let alone being surrounded in such a tragic circumstances.
Right.
So one of the projects that I did, which is definitely a high-end project, we took what was called OpenSim, which is basically a virtual environment software like Minecraft, and we put it on our own server. So there is the software is free. The server, you need to have some know-how in that, but you can also do what's called sim on a stick and put it on a flash drive if you want kind of your own personal creations, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
We recreated the streets of Amsterdam and the secret annex, so kids could get an experience seeing the annex in a virtual representation. So, most students won't be able to go to Amsterdam and see the house as a museum. So this is a way for them to at least experience the look and how, the quarters and how tight they were, and how you could maybe live in those circumstances. So that's just one of the projects we worked on. That developed into we did the Heir of the King project, also an OpenSim, and that was a virtual recreation of a medieval village, and the kids kind of level up from being a peasant in the medieval village, and then as they work their way up, leveling up through kind of gamified strategies, they get to the castle, and then they try and interact with a Arthurian legend, like who is the heir of the king. I'll give my colleague Mary Howard a shout out for that, because she was great at pulling a lot of the curriculum together for that. And so again, I could talk a lot about the projects we've done and we're continuing to do. And it's, flowing into literature and art and architecture as well.
Yeah, I love the way that it's connecting those more curriculum kind of things there that you see listed in your standards with something that enables the kids to really experience it.
Yeah, and it certainly goes into other avenues, from coding to, just architecture, design, creation pieces that we didn't even think about when it first started. Again, we started in history and wound up blending so many things together.
Right. With OpenSim, is that so? You created the tours that they were going through. You built out these spaces.
Yep. We built them as teachers, and then eventually we had kids creating as far as the architecture. And
now, when the kids go into the ones that you've created, is that in OpenSim as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and just I'll send this out there. We're a New York-based public entity, and if there's other schools out there that want to try it or collaborate, we have been able to collaborate from other states, other countries. We'd love to reach out, and as long as you can work with us, and we have the server, we have the stuff, we can collaborate, because really that's an enriching experience for our students.
Oh yeah,
to collaborate. And in the States, what we'd love to do, I haven't found a partner yet for this one, is we have a Civil War encampment, and we'd love to have a school in the North and the South be able to share and build some understanding of the Civil War through two perspectives that way.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so you're saying if you're using OpenSim, you can make some really, really very impressive stuff, but it requires having access to the server, and it requires the OpenSim software.
For the general, user, that's probably a high-end way to do it. That's going to take some know-how on the server side. And
so what do we do if we're either somebody that's just kind of dipping their toes in, or maybe they just have Chromebooks? How would they get started with this? My
first recommendation would be CoSpaces. I've really loved what they've done with this. The only limitation with CoSpaces is basically one person, one design. So there's not like, you can't bring in a couple different people to build. But to get kids started building and to get them sharing things, will create a virtual reality experience. You can put goggles on. You don't have to have those, but you can. So that gets kids started with building and creating and coding. It's an awesome program. Really, just I've seen third grade kids just take off with it, and the teacher basically just got out of their way and let the kids go, and the magic happened.
Oh, with building in it.
Yeah. Even the coding pieces, there's 2 free coding tutorials that the kids walk through and learn from, and they're I think you can go on code.org and get those.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the kids can just start doing their own coding. And again, it's broken down into some pretty simple blocks to get kids started, which is what I love. And I mean, for me as an adult, it really helped kind of frame how these kind of higher end design programs like Blender work, or, even things like what Pixar does with, RenderMan and Unity, like 3D graphics and gaming programs. So
right.
It's a great precursor.
Oh, that does sound great. So I know, and when I used to teach a STEM class, we used SketchUp, which used to only work on PC and Mac, but now works on Chromebooks as well. And we would have some students build communities. And like you said, with CoSpaces, they couldn't collaborate in one file. But what we would have them do is kind of plan it together and get it to scale. And then each kid would be building a different section or building of their community, and then using a server or sharing files on Google Drive or however they want to do it, they would then, on one kind of master computer, they would then put it all together. Is that something you can do in CoSpaces, where you save 2 different files and then copy from one file and pop into the other one?
That's a great question. I haven't done that. That doesn't mean it can't be done. But as far as I know, I haven't seen it yet, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. And but that's a neat idea, which kind of brings me also to Minecraft.
Yeah.
Minecraft is another one that is definitely one where you can bring kids together. And that's really kind of the key piece of Minecraft, is that you're interacting with others. If you're an Office 365 school, that's pretty easy to get going and set up. Otherwise, you can set up, personal accounts that, kids accounts and family accounts where you can have kids interact. But Minecraft is really a great one because it gets kids creating together, in a collaborative fashion, which I think is awesome. And that's what I love about the OpenSim piece too, is that kids are in there simultaneously interacting and creating. So
yeah, and I know Minecraft does have an education division. I don't know the details about what kinds of devices you could use it on and things like that, but that's a good thing for people to explore out there if they want to try this out. I know it works on Windows. I know it works on Mac. I don't believe it works on Chromebooks, but I have heard some people say that there's ways to access it on Chromebooks. So who knows? Maybe that's a possibility.
Yep. That does seem like that's out there.
But the good news is that you could certainly use CoSpaces on each device, and you could definitely use SketchUp on each device. So there's a number of different ways that students can kind of get hands-on to, so to speak, to creating these environments and gaining that kind of first-person understanding of these historical locations and experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're going to put in the show notes for everybody links to some of Andy's projects, that Holocaust project that he mentioned, and some of those other ones he's done through his work and through the ISTE Virtual Environments Network. And then we'll put some information and links in about CoSpaces and Microsoft and Education and OpenSim. And then if anybody, I'm hoping I'm not volunteering you for something here, Andy, but if anybody is interested in maybe trying out OpenSim or something like that, Andy's email address and Twitter handle will be in the show notes. So you can reach out to Andy and, request some assistance or to collaborate with him, like he suggested with OpenSim, if that is something you're interested in going for, because like he said, it might be something, big to bite off the very first time you try it. But you could find Andy on Twitter at AM Wheelock. That's WHEELOCK, or online at coffeewithageek.org. And then you can reach out to Andy and make some plans for learning how to do these things with your students.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, Andy. Well, thanks so much for being on today.
Happy to be here. Honored.
And there you have it. Plenty of knowledge and ideas from Andy Wheelock. Again, you can connect with him at AM Wheelock. That's WHEELOCK on Twitter. And check out his YouTube show by visiting coffeewithageek.org. Before this episode rides off into the sunset, I want to share some of the awesome feedback, ideas, and reviews that you've all shared with me and our informal educational duct tape PLN. First off, in Apple Podcasts, we're less than a month into the show, and it's already received 10 ratings, all of them 5 stars, and I want to thank those listeners. If you use Apple Podcasts and haven't reviewed the show, it'd help if you did. You're even allowed to give it a 4-star rating, maybe even a 3-star rating. Anyhow, 5 of those people were nice enough to include a review with their rating, rating, which is greatly appreciated. I forgot to give a shout out last week to Vanilla Silla, whoever you are, for your review, so thanks. On Twitter, dozens of people tweeted this past week with a hashtag EDU duct tape. Here are a few of my favorites. At MOlson14, Matt said, I love the hashtag EDU duct tape podcast. Would love to make GIFs. Can you recommend tools to use for Mac, free or paid? Well, Matt, I use Camtasia, which really is the best out there for making GIFs, but it can be a bit pricey. I think the value matches the price if you intend to use it as often as I do. If you want some other options, visit jakemiller.net and search for GIF creation options. I've got a post about some of the available choices in there, and you can learn a little bit more about them that way. At EdTech Antics, that's Corey, shared about the pod during Q Chat, hashtag CUE chat. Thanks for doing that, Corey. At Podcast PD is another awesome podcast out there. They tweeted, Chris Nessie and AJ Bianco, that's two of the co-hosts of the show, have started listening to hashtag EDU duct tape. This is a brand new podcast in the hashtag Podcast PD space. If you're looking for solid EdTech content with a fun twist, subscribe today. Thanks for that, guys. At AE Canon FS, Ann gave a shout out to episode 2 guest Ann Radefeld and said, thanks for sharing on hashtag EDU duct tape. Great ideas and inspiring. If you want to virtually visit hashtag New Mexico, let me know. My 5th graders would love to meet classes from around the U.S. Rumor has it that the plans are being made for this connection. I talked to one Ann to see if she'd connected with the other Ann, and she said yes, they're working on a time to do that. So exciting. At PW Tech, that's PDUBYA Tech, TECH, Paul said, another great episode of hashtag EDU duct tape on feedback, and then asks, Jake, did you know that when you post a Loom link in Google Docs, it will pop up with its own embedded player in the doc? Then students don't have to leave the doc to view the screencast. I actually did not know that, Paul, which is really exciting. I can't wait to try that out. So what he's referring to is we Sarah Rivera and I in episode 3 talked about giving students feedback in video format, either with Screencastify or Loom, and we talked about pros and cons of the two of them. This would be a major pro for Loom, so it's something I do plan to go and check out. Next up, at PureGrade, that's the official account for PureGrade. They reached out to me on Twitter after Sarah shared about their tool in episode 3. They let me know that PureGrade does, in fact, have integration with Google Classroom, which is exciting, and they wanted you all to have 3 months of premium PureGrade for free. Just use the code DuctTape19, DUCTTAPE 19, and you'll get 3 months of PureGrade for free, the premium version. Thanks also to the following hashtag EDU duct tape tweeters: at Allie McCutch, at Allison ETEC, at Ann Radefeld, episode 2 guest, at B Cohen 807-25380, at BRSD EdTech, at FRC_Lara, LARA, at Gallagher_Tech, at Hartel 30, at Jenna_Langle, at Camel Guard, at Krista Rathwell, at Mr_Fortney, at Mr_Stitzel, at Mr. Oris Tech. That's my friend Alex Oris, who you're actually going to be hearing in the very next episode. At Mrs. Tech Pig, at Miss Alessandro with a 0 for the O on the end there, at RF Peterson 80, at Screencastify, the actual Screencastify account, at Sean J. Fahey, who you'll be hearing here on the podcast in a few weeks, at SEW 1080, SEW 1080, at Tech Coach Manny. Manny's been cracking me up with his posts in the Flipgrid group too. At Tina, and Tina, I'm not going to be able to say your last name, so I'm just going to spell it, SCIUMBATA. And finally, at Wing Willie. Okay. And finally, here's some feedback that was shared in the Edu Duct Tape Flipgrid community. I'm going to save some of the awesome feedback for future episodes. I really appreciate all of you that left some. It's going to be played sooner or later. The very first share to the grid was by Matt Olson, so it should certainly be the first one I share here. So here's Matt.
Hey, Jake. My name is Matt Olson. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I teach at Parkland Middle School. I teach 7th grade pre-algebra. Looking forward to getting a lot of great ideas on this podcast. I've heard the first 3 episodes, and man, what a lot of great stuff that can be used in the classroom to make lessons more effective, to make the content more engaging for the students, and just to build a better connection and a better relationship with my students. I can't wait to hear all the other great stuff that I know you're going to have on the podcast, and to listen to all the great guests. My Twitter handle is at MOlsen, OLSEN 14. Give me a follow. Thanks, Jake, for everything you do. And I look forward to the next podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate your video. That was fun. Let's do one more. Here's Jonathan Fortney. I like his because it relates to something we talked about in the last episode.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Fortney. I'm a technology teacher at Dolores Gonzalez Elementary School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What I love about the Educational Duct Tape podcast is that Jake and his guests introduce me to new technologies that I've never heard of before, or even helps me to think through more complexly the technologies that I have used and thought of. For example, today on the episode that I listened to, him and his guest were talking about the differences between Screencastify and Luma and about how to use both of them instead of just one of them. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Another thing that I think is very valuable about this podcast is that Jake also will say, if this technology doesn't work for you, or if this isn't something that you vibe with, don't use it. That's okay. You know what's best for your students. So I really like that perspective as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really like how Jonathan pointed out that he realized that he doesn't have to choose between Screencastify or Loom, but he could choose based on what his specific goals are. Maybe sometimes he uses Screencastify, other times he uses Loom, or maybe he finds that one of them is the perfect solution for him, but it really depends on what his situation is and what he's trying to achieve. Okay, so that does it for episode 4. I've saved some more Flipgrid submissions to share next week, but I hope you all will add even more to that queue of submissions there. Please join us next week when Alex Orris will be my guest to talk about student choice and students as creators. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please consider rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app. #EduDuctTape.